show us some of her work. And those who are in 3D, we're really going to be focusing on narratives and some of her figurative work. So, if you need a little bit of inspiration as you're planning your next project, this could be really helpful for that. And then for ceramics, just because she worked a lot with ceramics, it's just kind of cool to see what other people have been doing. Um, and she's made some really impressive and beautiful things. So, uh, with further with further ado, I'll let Alex take over.
Sure. Hi, guys. Thanks for doing this little experiment on virtual field trips. I am the program director for the Mary Nohl Art Environment, which is in Fox Point, just north of where you guys are. I'm sure that some of you are familiar with this place. I live at the house, and I have been doing restoration of it, and then I also kind of direct and manage all things that are related to Mary, her artwork, and the site. And so Keely asked me if I could spend some time with you guys today talking about Mary's work and kind of the way that she thought about making art and what she did here, because if her work is so heavily figurative, and those figures often are telling a story, and she's thinking about the narrative of living along the lake and kind of her experience of being here in this specific place. So unfortunately, the internet, also, if the internet gets choppy, just let me know, Keely, because this part of the house that I'm in, which is where Mary has done a lot of her work, the internet's a little sketchy. But right now, I am sitting in Mary's living room, which you can see is filled with her art, as is the rest of the house. And so Mary was born in 1914, and she went to art school at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and she got a BFA in painting and drawing, an art education degree, and then she taught public high school in Baltimore County for 2 years, and then she taught in Milwaukee for 5 years after that. And she realized she didn't really love teaching, and so when she decided that she wasn't going to teach anymore, she had started experimenting with ceramics and opened a pottery studio kind of near Good Hope Road and Green Bay Road. And she ran that for about 10 years, and then just really wasn't interested in running a business anymore. And so at that point, they closed down the pottery studio, and her job became kind of taking care of the house here that is located on the lake. So, and I guess for those of you who maybe don't know, the Mary Nohl house is about 60 feet off of the edge of Lake Michigan down here in Fox Point. And the house is totally covered in her artwork, and she built 59 concrete sculptures in the yard. And so if you drive by, you'll see this brightly colored painted house with all kinds of artwork on the outside of it, and all of these kind of figurative concrete sculptures that are all over the property. So let's see. I guess for ceramics, I have some examples here to show you guys. And so Mary's pottery studio, her idea was that she was going to make objects that she could sell to places like florists and boutiques, and this is in the mid-1940s to mid-1950s, to give you a little bit of a sense of history. And so some of the examples that we have in the house, she made thousands and thousands of objects, and most of it is slip cast, so using porcelain slip and pouring it into plaster molds, and then ending up with objects. So some of the things that she made, this is a lamp. So she made a lot of lamps, and you can see the lamp has all these little faces pressed into it. And then on the bottom, I don't know if this translates, but can you see that? It says Mary Nohl. So in all her molds, she would carve her name so that you knew that they were her objects. And then another lamp, she made these. This is also slip cast porcelain, these fish lamps. So I like the fish lamp. And then she also made some really complicated slip cast objects. So this is this kind of Conestoga wagon, but it's hollow. So what she would do is she would make a positive form, like she would sculpt this out of solid clay and then make a mold on it out of plaster and then take that mold apart and take the sculpted version out, and then she would pour liquid porcelain into that mold, and then let it kind of dry in there, and then open the mold up, and then you would have this. And then she would glaze it and fire it in this custom-built kiln that she had, and then try to sell them. So, but she also made some really funky objects. So this is like this weird series of horses that she made, and so the horse itself is also slip cast, so it's hollow. But you can see this like textured hair. So she would add these little kind of like swirls of clay onto these pieces after the fact, and then she made tons and tons of these little figurines of all different kind of varieties. So this is a person holding a pot. And these are hand built, these are not cast. So, and you can see again, it has that little Mary Nohl stamp on it. So because she wasn't really interested in running a business, she didn't sell a lot of it. So I work for the John Michael Kohler Art Center, which is up in Sheboygan. And when Mary died, she left all of her artwork to the art center. So we have it in our collection, and we have thousands and thousands of these pieces of ceramics in boxes up there. So in our safe art storage up in Sheboygan. Is there another question? I'm not sure how you want to. Do you want to like have people ask questions as we go, or?
Yeah, I say if people do have questions, kind of as things go. I wish there was like a hand raising thing, but if you just type in the chat, I know that you may be able to see the chat. So if people have questions, type it in, and we can kind of go over that as they come up.
That sounds great.
Cool.
Okay. So it's a little tricky to move around with the computer because the internet is a little slow, so it'll want to kind of cut out. But I will like slowly rotate so you get a sense of some of the things that she made. So we've got paintings and sculptures, and I know you guys are talking about figurative art, and so Mary would get driftwood from the beach, and I can't totally see where I'm at, but she would get driftwood from the beach because she really didn't like spending money, so she would try to get all the material she could for free, and then she would start carving figures. So we have hundreds and hundreds of these carved wooden figures. And then she would get, like this one, she would get these glass marbles and make eyes. And so she had a wood shop in the cottage here, and she would make all her sculptures inside. Yes, all of the work in the house is her own artwork. And so that's one thing that's really interesting. So I'm an artist myself, and I don't think I've ever lived with my own artwork, but Mary only lived with her own artwork. There are very few things in the house that aren't her things that she made. So the house over time kind of became the venue for the art. So everything she made, she was kind of making through the lens of thinking about how it would live in the house, and how it would kind of be in conversation with other things that she had made in the past. And so if you're thinking about narratives and kind of how works of figurative art can play into a narrative, you could also think about how a figure tells a story in relationship to another artwork or another figure. And so a lot of times that's kind of how I think about Mary's work, especially in the carved wood, where she's making one figure and then kind of seeing what that process is like of making that figure, and then adjusting that process to the next one that she's making. And so what you have is this story that's told about learning how to work with a material or learning how to work with a process. And so maybe Mary's narrative isn't like a story in the traditional sense of like, here's a character and the character moves through time and experience, but what we're actually seeing is a narrative around a person understanding or mastering a material or an idea or a process. And so a lot of Mary's work is kind of functional in that way, in that it tells the story of her learning how to make things. So let's see. So then she would also make things like this, which this is, again, it's carved wood that she was driftwood from the beach, and then she mosaicked it in all of this blue colored glass. So these are really cool. She made a whole bunch of these. And so again, to think about like going from that other piece I showed you that was just plain wood with the two yellow eyes to then kind of being like, okay, well, what else can I do with these materials that I now know how to work with? So why don't I cover the outside in mosaic and kind of see how that figure changes, right? And we've got more figures that are carved. And so another thing that's really interesting about these is that, so this shape, this kind of figure that you see, there are many paintings that she made that also have this same figurative form in the painting. And then there are also concrete sculptures in the yard that look just like this. But those concrete sculptures in the yard are, life size. And so this is maybe a foot tall. And so to think about how the difference of scale or size can, change the way that we understand what a figure is trying to tell us, right? So how this feels really different as, something that's an object that you can handle and kind of feels intimate versus a large concrete sculpture that is maybe more imposing or maybe feels more like a person in real life, right? Outside of the fact that it's concrete, but in terms of how it exists in space. And then we're gonna try to move, and we'll see how this goes. So one of my favorite figures in the house, and we'll see if this translates, is, can you guys see this thing right here? So Mary would make these crazy figures, and they're woven wire, and you can see the little toes are like these kind of like curly forms. So, and they're really amazing. It's got these kind of jewel eyes, and so they all hang from the ceiling. And then there's this horse figure right here, which is pretty cool. And then we're gonna be a little risky here and try to move to the other side of the room. There's this giant. Can you see that? The life-size figure that's right there? Yeah, so that one's really crazy. And as an artist myself who has worked in a lot of material as a sculptor, I have no idea how she made that thing. It's really wild. So, and then over here we have another one of those glass kind of mosaic pieces. I really like this one because of the hat that it has. I'm trying to kind of see. There we go. So that one's really cool. And again, this is all carved wood. And then she is using glass to do the mosaic and grout to, concrete grout to set the glass tile into. And then we also have a lot of these versions of these driftwood these small stick driftwood figures. So she would collect these little pieces of driftwood and kind of combine them into these figurative forms. There's another really good one over here on the window, if you guys can see that. So yeah, she's doing a lot of things with the figure. And then we have some musicians on the table, and these are made out of flour and water, like kind of paper mache style. So she's working with really kind of humble material. She's not kind of making things out of, like metal or stuff that would take a lot of money and resources to make. She's just figuring out how to work in a really simple way that she could do by herself and she could do without spending a lot of money. Yeah. So let's see what else. What else, Keely? What feels exciting?
So, something that when I was mentioning this to some of the students yesterday and Monday, a lot of them, oh, the witch, oh, there's all these rumors that like her family died, and these figures kind of watch over to if they're ever going to come back. So, how did she deal with these rumors, and are any of them true?
Okay, so none of them are true. Zero of the rumors are true. So I think a really important part of Mary's story is that she was she was just an artist, and she was someone who was really, really driven to make the work that she made, and she consciously made a decision to live by herself and to not get married and to not have kids, because she knew that the time that she needed to make the artwork that she felt she had to make, that was a sacrifice that she was going to have to make in her life. And so it was important to her to have her time be her own and to have it not be interrupted. And so, unfortunately, in the 1970s, when the house kind of started becoming more present in the way that it is, as the concrete sculptures kind of started popping up in the yard and the house was getting painted different colors, people didn't really know how to talk about that at the time because of just the way that conversations and culture were. And so people started calling her the Witch of Fox Point, which is unfortunately a negative labeling of her because people didn't understand what she was doing. And so, part of my job is to kind of correct that story, because it's actually what happens is that when we call it the Witch's House and when we call Mary Nohl the Witch of Fox Point, it actually takes away and it distracts from this amazing body of artwork that she made. And the other thing is that when Mary died, she left $11.3 million to the Greater Milwaukee Foundation. And so 2020 is the 17th anniversary of the Mary Nohl Fellowship, which is 5 annual artist grants for Milwaukee, Waukesha, Ozaukee, and Washington counties of $10,000 and $20,000 for artists to do whatever they want with that money. And so when we talk about her as the witch, what happens is that, again, we really we push the narrative about her importance as an artist and her importance as a philanthropist to the back seat, because she wasn't a witch. And if she was, that would have been totally fine, but she wasn't. And so, she did not bury her family in the yard, and she didn't, her family didn't drown in the lake, and she didn't, her parents died of old age, and she ended up living in the house by herself. And so she used that opportunity of being here alone to make this incredible place and to really kind of think about what it means to live in a place as a place changes, and to have those changes be reflected back into the artwork that she's making. And so, for example, this room, every room, as you can see, has many different colors on the walls and on the ceiling, and it's all kind of crazy paint treatments. And so one day I was having coffee in this room, and I think in the restoration work that I've done, I've probably matched about 35 colors, which is a lot of colors to have inside your house. And I had often wondered, how does Mary make these choices about what colors she's using, right? Because 35 colors is a lot of colors to pick in general, for anything, let alone your house. And I was sitting in this living room having coffee, and an important thing to know is that in this room, looking out that window, you see Lake Michigan, right? It's right there. And so I'm sitting at this table that I'm currently sitting at talking to you guys, watching the sun come up. And as the sun came over the horizon, this pink light comes up, and it comes straight through the window, and it hits these walls, and that pink light is the same color as the pink on the walls. And I realized that every color that Mary is choosing, every texture, every pattern, all the forms that she's coming up with, they're all about experiencing this landscape in this house as it changes throughout the season. So it's the changing color of the lights. It's the way that the water changes color when there's more sun or more clouds or ice or snow. It's the changing color of the plants. And so all of her work, all of the narrative that she's building into her figures and her color choices and the concrete sculptures in the art, they're about the experience of being here. And there are other things that filter in and out. She traveled all over the world, and you see a lot of her the things that she saw while she was traveling to places like Egypt and Iran and Europe and South America and the Caribbean. Different motifs that kind of, or themes that pop up from those things that she's seeing in other places and other cultures. But primarily the work is about what it's like being here and how important Lake Michigan and that this piece of property was to her and how she came to kind of know herself as a person and as an artist, right?
Yeah, that's really awesome. We some of us were looking at some of her work. We watched a video, and she said that her biggest influence was kind of Lake Michigan and her home. As far as like the figures and how you've been researching her life and restoring all of it, why do you think she chose figures?
Sure. So when Mary went to art school at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, she took a lot of classes in illustration and in fashion. And so, and then also at the time, so she's there from 1933 until 1938. And so surrealism is kind of the predominant art form that's happening in the contemporary art world at that time. And so figurative art making or figuration or a figurative practice is a really kind of present thing as she's going through the kind of the educational process of becoming an artist, right? Because there are many ways to become an artist, and you don't have to go to art school to become an artist. You can just figure it out on your own. But when she was going through a more formal training, the figure was a really big part of that training. And so and she was really interested in the body, and when she would travel, her favorite thing to do was find free time to just go and draw, and her favorite thing to draw was people that she was seeing. And so I think that's a big part of why there's so much figurative work in her body of work, is because she was really interested in how bodies tell stories and how those stories are kind of told through different material in representing the body.
And then I just have to ask this is out of like all the artworks that she has there, which is quite a lot, what do you think is your favorite or series or style?
That's an almost impossible question. So we have almost 4,000 artworks that she left, which is a lot. And that's a really difficult question to answer. I think for me, the kind of place as a whole, like the idea of how this place became a thing that reflects back the place that it is kind of my favorite part of it. But there are some concrete sculptures that I really love. These kind of there are these figures that she actually made in ceramics, which unfortunately I don't have any at the house, but they're these kind of like curvy ghost shapes. And then she ends up making those, and the objects are about this big. They're pretty small. But she ends up making those same figures life size in concrete that are in the yard, and I really love those pieces. And to answer that question, there are 5 questions. Oh wait, no, there's just one question. I do live here, yes. So I have lived at the house for about 4 years now, and so I keep the house and all the artwork in good shape and make sure that everything is safe and cared for down here. And I get to do things like this, where I get to kind of bring Mary into the world. I am not related to her. So when she died, she was the last of the family line. So my job is to answer both of those questions. So my job, yes, is I get paid to take care of the house and kind of do the work to repair and restore her artwork in the house, and to kind of bring Mary's artwork out into the world, like with what I'm doing right now, and kind of things that are similar, of talking to students and to college students and to people who are doing research or scholarship or writing papers or making documentaries. So I live here, and I get paid to do a job that I really love, which is I'm very lucky for. There's another question that popped up. I have not broken a piece of her artwork, fortunately. That is a good question.
That's good.
Knock on wood. I tread very lightly around here, and so I went to graduate school for sculpture. So my background is in making objects, and a lot of my time prior to taking this job I was both a college professor, but also I worked a lot in kind of construction and like building stuff. And so I have this job kind of happened because I just had a foot in both worlds, where I kind of knew how to do the construction end of things and fix stuff and work with materials and kind of do carpentry and metalworking, so that if something did break, I generally could figure out how to fix things, but nothing is broken. So, yeah. So we have about, I think maybe about 15 to 20% of her artwork is in the house, but the majority of her artwork is in Sheboygan, in our collection storage up there. And so in January, we are opening a new museum facility in Sheboygan called the Art Preserve. And Mary will have an area dedicated just to her work in this new facility, where you'll be able to see the majority of those almost 4,000 artworks. They're all in storage, but you can see all the storage. So you'll kind of have access to most of the work that she made over her lifetime. And she worked in every kind of material you could think of outside of kind of video or photography. So she made a lot of jewelry. She made tons of works on paper, printmaking, ceramics, wood sculpture, kinetic sculpture, a little bit of metal stuff, stained glass. She did lamp working, like made all these little glass figures, kind of using a torch on small pieces of glass. Some fiber work. Really, her life was devoted to learning how to work with material, and she said that she loved tools, and she loved learning to work with tools and getting new tools and finding new ways to make things. So that was always a really big motivating factor for her, was kind of figuring out new avenues to make artwork with, new materials to make artwork with, new ways to kind of exercise her ideas through the process of making things.
So, I don't know if I talked to you. Are you an artist yourself, then?
I am, yes.
Okay, so how has your own personal art been influenced, being surrounded by her art every single day? How has your art kind of evolved according to that?
So this is a question I get asked semi-regularly, and I honestly, I think I'm too deep in it to really know how to answer that question right now. I think that it will take some time of not being in the house and being able to kind of look back at what I've made during this time period to see how, in terms of an aesthetic or a visually direct way of influence, I think that the thing that's really important for me, and that I think for a lot of artists, and why I'm attracted to places like Mary Nohl and to other artists that are kind of self-taught or kind of build these worlds, is that it's about giving themselves permission to make art, right? They're not kind of hung up on is this good enough, or is this smart enough, or am I good enough, or am I smart enough? It's just, it's the creative impulse to make, and they don't really let things get in the way of that. And so for me, the most important thing about Mary Nohl is that she reminds me that I can just give myself permission to do whatever I want. That's why I became an artist, right? Was that I wanted to have full access to my creative agency to be able to follow my own rules and make my own rules and kind of make the things that felt important to me. And so, but when you go to art school for 6 years, it can kind of like train you to think that like your ideas have to be a certain way or about a certain thing, or that you have to have all the answers, and you don't have to have all the answers. Actually, it's better to not have all the answers, and to leave yourself with a lot more questions. And so Mary is a great example of that, and I think that will be her most lasting impact on me and in my studio practice. And yes, I can have friends over in this house, which I don't do very often. The house is really, really sensitive, and I live in a part of the house that's not full of artwork, but because of how much artwork there is in the house, I try to really keep that to a minimum. So, but I can certainly have people over. We hang out in the yard when the weather's nice, mostly.
Does anybody else have any questions about Mary, about Alex, about her work, about his work?
I do not have another house.
So how long have you been living there?
I've been living here for about 3.5 years. So I was a college professor in Chicago before I took this job. So I lived down there, and then this kind of came up, and it was an opportunity I couldn't say no to. Once in a lifetime.
Oh, awesome. So I actually have a question in front of me.
Sure.
So how long do you have to live there?
Say louder.
How long do you have to live there for?
I mean, I could probably leave whenever I want, but I don't actually know the answer to that question. There's a lot of work to still be done down here to basically make sure that all the artwork that's on site is in a stable condition. And so once that work is done, which we don't really know how long that will take, that will kind of be the end for me. Or at least I'll move on to something else.
Yeah. Do you have like any plans for the house in the future? Like, what do you see? Yeah, what future do you see for the house?
So the house, there's no public access to the house. It's a residential property, and so we can't do tours or anything like that. But I think that in an ideal world, and also because the house is really sensitive because of the kind of artwork and the way that she treated the house, like it would become so quickly damaged in an irreparable way that to have people in the house, even in a small amount, would really do some damage that we couldn't come back from. So the ideal situation, I think, would be that we could use the house as an opportunity for people who are artists or who are researchers to come and live here for longish periods of time, whether that be several months or a year or however long, and basically use the house as an opportunity to be inspired to make their own work or do their own research. So that, again, it's like a really minimal impact on the house, but that impact that is being had is actually generating either artwork or writing or a documentary film or something that brings Mary's work out into the bigger world, right? So that's kind of our, at least, there's a lot of questions around what we can and potentially will do, but that I think that more than likely it will be like a person lives here who kind of functions as the caretaker, but is also an artist or a writer who's interested in Mary's work, and they can use it as an opportunity to be inspired to do their own work.
We have a question. Can you call it a flex to live in the Mary Nohl house?
I think you could call it a flex. Yeah.
I think so too.
I'm not really that guy, but like you could call it a flex.
It is, definitely. Awesome. Anybody else have questions? That's a lot. That's so cool. I mean, I would love to live in a house like Mary Knowles. I mean, it's just so beautiful. Everything I feel like she did for a reason, whether it made sense in her head. I mean, it's incredible to me.
I love that house.
Ilya has all the questions. Is it big?
It's not a big house. It's a little lakeside cottage. It's not it's not a giant house. It has 2 bedrooms in it, and like a kitchen and a bathroom. And it's like a standard size small little lake cottage. People do not come by and break the artwork. In the past they used to. When she was still living here, people would jump over the fence and they would really torment her. They'd throw rocks through the windows. They'd steal things out of the yard, and they were really not particularly kind to her. But now we have security cameras and a security system, and all kinds of things to prevent that from happening. So so Mary Nohl lived from 1914 until 2001. So she was 87 years old. The furniture, yes. Well, it's kind of a mix, actually. So she later in her life did buy some modern furniture, but there's also a lot of antique furniture from when her parents still lived in the house. And she grew up on the east side of Milwaukee, and so when they moved up here full time in 1943. And they brought some of those pieces of antique furniture with them, but because she was not precious with things, it all got painted crazy colors. So it's kind of a mishmash of furniture in the house. We renovated the house in 2015. It needed a new roof, all new windows. A lot of siding. Some of the actual walls of the house were rebuilt from scratch because there was a lot of both termite and weather damage. So there were some major renovations about 5 years ago.
Patrick asked, "Is it haunted?"
It is not. It is not. That's also a question I get all the time. I mean, I will say that to be in a house that is so comprehensively touched by a person that every surface is painted and every surface has their artwork on it, there's an energy in the house because that person is present, right? That person has made them. It's not white walls. It doesn't feel like anyone could live here. It feels like only Mary Nohl could be here. So yeah, she has an energy in the house, but it's not haunted. It's not like there's no like scary ghosts or anything. Unfortunately, I cannot give you a tour. There is no access to the house in that way. But once that facility opens up in Sheboygan in January, you will be able to go up there and see. You'll see way more of her artwork up in Sheboygan than you would ever be able to see even if you came to the house, which is pretty amazing.
So, there's a question here. What about a virtual tour? But as you said before, the Wi-Fi is very spotty, and it's pretty difficult to keep us on the line because of Wi-Fi.
Yeah. So one of the things that we will be doing is I'm working with a company to do basically like both a 3D scan of the interior of the house and then also some videos, some like high def video walkthroughs. So at that facility in Sheboygan, you'll be able to actually move through the house in a virtual space and see, exactly how it is. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Then Spiro asked, so the artwork in the house is never seen before?
Not really. I mean, so all of the artwork in the house has been photographed and it's in our database. So if you went on the museum's website, you could see every single artwork in the house. And so when we do that process of doing scan of the house where you can kind of walk through it. And so what they do is they set up a camera and then they shoot photos, and they basically make this map of the house through photographs where you go online and you can click where the camera was and it moves you kind of through the house. And so you'll be able to click on an individual artwork and it'll take you to our database to give you the information about each individual piece.
Awesome. Yeah. So we have, I'd say like a minute left because I know a few of you have to get to some other classes. But any other questions? Anything else on your minds? Anything else? Do you guys have any questions in here? No?
Cool.
Cool. Well, that was pretty awesome.
My pleasure.
Yes, and actually more than like I expected as far as questions and some really interesting things. One more, yeah.
I would not change anything in the house. But the idea is that if someone were to come here and they wanted to write an essay or do artwork, they would actually never know that I did any of the work here. That if you came here, it would be experiencing Mary's house as Mary did it. So, outside of you guys knowing that I've done work here because of me telling you, the idea would be, if I could, no, I would not.
Still,
Both from like a moral and ethical perspective, and also, it's not my artwork, so not my place to change.
I think I would agree with you on that, definitely. I think it's all just so original and so beautiful and has such a special touch to it. It's not worth it, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed it. I'm so glad that you all showed up. And great questions too. And thank you so much, Alex. This was such a treat. I'm a fan myself, and I've told you that multiple times. So this is a treat for me as well. And yeah, I mean, thank you so much for taking time in your day and showing us, a part of your house.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, I'm sure, if I have any questions in the future, if any questions pop up, I can email you those, and I'm sure we can get some answers there. So,
That sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. You too. Enjoy.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Yeah, so they right there.
It's possible. All right. Thanks, everyone. That was pretty awesome.
I'll come by at like 12:30.
Okay, sounds cool. I got cookies, so.
Oh, perfect.
Oh yeah.
All right, I'll see you then.
All right. See you soon. Thanks, Blair.
First thing about growing is that your hands just like have constantly
Hey, Gabe. Emmett and Jackson say hello.
the water. So
If he's still there. It's okay if he's not.
It's definitely not there.
Yeah, he's not there. Well, that was cool. What did you think?
I didn't get to see it. I'm gonna go start recording.
Okay, perfect.
Yep. So that's what you want to do.
Awesome. Yeah, that was.
And so what you
that was
gotta
really
do
cool.
is it's called centering. It's the hardest thing of the whole thing. She's doing it.
Pulling off my phone.
Yeah, she was. You know what you're doing. I can tell because you're using. The problem with what she's doing now is her elbow. Do it again. More water. See her elbow going back and forth like a train.
Why is it so big?
That's not what you want. See where my elbow is raised here? So that the clay pushes into my leg, and then it doesn't move. But if your elbows are moving, it's not going to do it.
Tricky, you're trying to fucking this.
I can do it with my eyes closed.
No way.
How many times did it take for you to just be like perfect at it?
It's 20 years.
Yeah. But at first, were you like
Oh, yeah.
sucking at it? Yeah.
What are you gonna make?
I don't think I've successfully done
Most
it.
kids are bad